What's up, y'all? It's Chris, rh-usa.com, and as usual, it's Friday, and I thought I was going to have a slow day, but now it ends up being really big information that was announced on something that I predicted way back in 2015 that deals with Nike and Foot Locker, and I am obviously going to have a lot of phone calls coming in. So let's get to this recap of Chapter 1 with SNKRLAW. There are not going to be any spoilers. This is only going to be a quick recap on Chapter 1 and the beginning of the book, which is the introduction. As I said, SNKRLAW is easily one of the prettiest books that I have in my collection. After jumping into it, the first thing I realized, and I'm going through my stickies right here, for you guys who are following along, hopefully you went and got the book. If you haven't gotten the book, I understand some of you guys are like, oh, I'm not paying that for a book. You should. All right, so that's not, once again, this is not an advertisement. This is me going through and giving you guys my thoughts as I finish each section, but I'm doing so without giving away any context inside of the book. All right, so let's get to my stickies and see what I discussed first. And I think it had to do with Jared Goldstein, right? On this page, there's a section here, and I wrote this note, and I said a note is equivalent to a thesis/dissertation. In the book, Jared talks about, and this is important because I love to tell you guys that you need to persevere and fight through whatever struggles you're having. After he finished law school, he wanted to write his note on sneakers. Now, a note for me as an MFA, we have a thesis. For a PhD gets a dissertation, right? They're all the same things for each of us. So jurors, JDs, have notes that they write, and it has to be published. PhDs have dissertations that have to be published. MFAs have theses that have to be published. Very cool situation here. When the traditional path for Jared closed to publishing his note, Jared found an alternative method of publishing via sneaker media. Now, I know somebody's like, and that's a really big deal because it sets a precedence that sneaker media is a valid source of information when written with research. Now, everything I do on my website is researched. That doesn't tend to happen with the bigger sneaker outlets. It does with High Snobody, Hypebeast, and in some instances Complex. But I remember when these articles or this note went up that Jared wrote. I remember that, and I was like, that's different for Complex and Soul Collected. That's a completely different thing than I've ever seen. And I wondered what it was about. Now I know. So this is one of those things where for me it was like, oh wow, look at that. So that's the first note that I have on the introduction section. The next note I have, and they have a whole history. And what I wrote this note for was that Elizabeth Simmelhack, who's at Bada Museum, and she's written a host of books, and I have them all on my table in the front of the office. I don't have them sitting here, so I can't show them to you. This section that they've created on the creation of sneakers, of the sneaker, this section, Elizabeth does a much deeper dive into this section, but this section gives you a fantastic overview of the sneaker, the history of sneakers. Now, this is where I'll say obsessive sneaker disorder should get this book, take this entire section that Jared and Kenneth wrote, and they should expand on it. If this book does well enough and SNKRLAW gets out and gets big, SNKRLAW should become like this kind of Bible for sneaker books, and underneath that kind of tree, it should be a book by obsessive sneaker disorder, business books, Dylan Dittrich, myself, and we should have an entire course of study out of this, including Elizabeth Simmelhack. And I know Dee and Sean they worked with Elizabeth on some curated events at the Bada Museum. Boom. I know that's a lot, but let's keep going. It's only 2 more stickies for the chapter 1 section, okay? Here, in the section where they talk about the beginning of New Balance, I didn't know this. New Balance was the first to launch scientifically tested sneakers. Do you know they have never done any campaigns announcing that they were the first? Now, that's not in the book. That's me making that comment about New Balance and the fact that Nike gets all the coverage for research and development and New Balance was first. Now, on this same page, he talks about the swoosh and how it was designed for $35. And he drops a note about designer IP. And I wrote a note to myself and said, let me go to page 29. Now, I was going to go and drop some stuff in here on page 29, and it talks about intellectual property. But on this page, over here where New Balance is, I've got the Nike page front and center. On this page is where he dropped some more information that was pretty impressive. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that either. Anyway, that's that note. And then my final note, and then I'm ending this video. I know you guys are like, man, I thought you said this was going to be 3 minutes. I lied. So here we go. At the end of the section where he talks about the major sneaker companies, where he talks about all of the different sneaker companies, I recognize that Under Armour is completely overlooked and left out. It's kind of, it's telling, it's very telling that they didn't even think to include Under Armour in this section on the history. But there's an opening. Somebody else can actually sit down and start writing something about Under Armour if you want to. Always look at the positive aspects and the openings. I don't see a problem with them leaving Under Armour out because, to be fair, outside of Micro G and Curry, there really isn't much of a history for Under Armour as a footwear company. Like I said, that's telling. It's telling. There is also an opportunity for a book that goes into a discussion on Saucony and all of the other brands that exist that were not touched on here in this overview. So I'm moving on to chapter 2. And the rest of this section, man, it's just really dope information, really good stuff. But I'm moving on to chapter 2. That is the end of my review of chapter 1. Hopefully you guys like this. I don't have a timeline for when I'm going to be posting these videos. I'm simply doing it as I finish each chapter. That's it. SNKRLAW. Check it out. The link is in the description. Shout out Kenneth and Jared, man. It's excellent so far. Excellent. Good stuff. See you guys in a minute because there's a lot going on this Friday. And I shouldn't say that because these videos will get dated if I talk about certain things on certain days. It's like Q-Tip said, don't say the years. Peace, y'all.